Hey guys, Chandler here, back on my channel Alternate Journey, and today I'm going to be reacting to Arielle Scarcella video that my partner Sam recently had just sent me. A couple months back I reacted to her for the very first time, basically on the topic of whether or not transitioning was a new form of conversion therapy. So if you guys want to check that out, that will be linked down below. It was one of the longest videos I've ever made. It's almost 40 minutes long. This one I promise not to make too long, hopefully. So the video that I'm going to be reacting to is non-binary is confusing at best and sexist at worst.
Hey babes and babe lovers, so today's topic is non-binary, and as a member of the LGBT community, this comes up in conversations an awful lot, and I have never fully expressed what I think of non-binary, if it's even a thing, if it isn't a thing. First of all, I don't think that anyone in the non-binary community even can fully explain what non-binary is. It seems like it's this made-up term that anybody can use for whatever reason they want.
I'm not male, I'm not female, I'm somewhere floating around in there.
Wait, so you're a girl? You're a trans woman? But you're also non-binary? How is that possible? I don't get it.
I think that non-binary is actually a new woke way of saying androgynous, just like wielding a sword of wokeness over the new term. For validation purposes, for pronouns, for control.
Don't identify with having a gender because I found it really restrictive.
It gives me the freedom to express myself. If I wake up one day and I want to spike my hair and do punk rock makeup, I can do it.
So clothes, makeup, the way they speak, the way they act, whatever. And that's one of the reasons I haven't made a video on this topic. No one has really been able to come up with a concise definition for the term non-binary.
You define the labels don't define you. So you can bring your own definition to whatever label.
Yeah.
And secondly, most of the people I know or that I have seen that identify as non-binary are A, very, very young, and B, tend to seem like they are doing it for a very, very political reason, almost like a fuck you to the patriarchy or fuck you for telling me how I should think and act.
Non-binary people don't owe you shit. They can use whatever pronouns they see fit. If they dress femme or mask, don't worry about it, cause it's not your fucking bitch.
Which is funny because you're actually telling people and telling the world that you are taking yourself out of a box by putting yourself in another box. One of the questions I have for the non-binary community is there a difference between somebody that is actually non-binary and transsexual people? So transsexual meaning people that are born one sex, and transitioning, even though you can't technically transition to another sex, but visually secondary sex characteristics, trying to appear as the sex they feel more comfortable as. If non-binary simply means just the way that somebody feels or acts, isn't everybody inherently non-binary? You know?
Okay, let's just break this down. I hate how she always starts off with her video announcing that she's a part of the community, as if it gives her the right to bash other parts of the community. Just because you're part of the whole realm of the community, that doesn't mean that you know every aspect of the community and that you can gatekeep certain parts of the community. She said there was no clear definition of non-binary, so let me just show you what is the definition of non-binary. First is the definition of non-binary that has been part of our civilization. Non-binary, not relating to, composed of, or involving just two things. Relating to, using, or denoting a system of numerical notation that does not have two as a base. That's like the definition of non-binary in a whole realm of things. And that's how non-binary became the label of the non-binary, the gender, is because it's not relating to the two binary genders, male and female. So, non-binary. Also, another definition that I would like to share with you guys is genderqueer. Genderqueer is basically, a lot of people use it also with non-binary. Genderqueer, non-binary or genderqueer is a spectrum of gender identities that are not exclusively masculine or feminine. Identities that are outside the gender binary. So like what I just said. Non-binary identities can fall under the transgender umbrella, since many non-binary people identify with a gender that is different from their assigned sex. Anyone that's identifying as something that's not with the sex that they were born as is trans. So that's why, like, you hear non-binary trans. That does not mean that they are the same as transgender male or females. Like, she was confusing of, like, what's the difference between non-binary and transsexuals. I really don't use the phrase transsexual, although some people are starting to use it now for the phrase of people that completely transition, but I feel like that's a little of like a gatekeeping. We all have different levels of dysphoria. Not everyone has to do the full realm of transition, meaning getting hormones, top surgery, bottom surgery, and the whole 9 yards, that does not mean if you don't get a certain aspect, you're not trans. So like that's personally why I don't use the phrase transsexual, because it's kind of like internalized transphobia within the trans community. But that's just my own personal beliefs. So all the TikToks that she was showing, that's the problem with this society, is that we are known as such a online society now. These people that have a problem with the non-binary label, they take the few that are very artistic and just very about explaining about the masculine and femininity of it all, and they just use those videos to showcase, oh, this is what non-binary is. They're all like crazy people just trying to escape from masculine and femininity and like the societal labels of things. And it's just like, a lot of non-binary individuals, they don't actually look that artistic. They will say crazy, but I just view them as artistic. A lot of non-binary people actually look as a societal normal. Like, you can't tell, just like with trans individuals, you can't tell who's non-binary. You can't tell who's a trans man, a trans woman. You can't tell who's cis. I feel like there is such a rise with a lot of people identifying with non-binary, especially when they're first questioning their gender, because it is that gender that literally has no societal definition of the percentage of masculine and femininity that you have to have. I feel like that's why there's such a rise with it, because we have created such a society that has just termed certain aspects, certain characteristics and abilities to a certain gender or sex. And that's why a lot of people are escaping to the non-binary label, because a lot of people, especially like what she said, a lot of young individuals are starting to realize, like, we are all born with masculine and feminine traits. The thing when it comes to being non-binary though, just like with trans individuals, there is dysphoria, especially with the sake of pronouns. A lot of non-binary individuals uses they, them pronouns because of the such disconnect with she, her, or he, him.
Everybody has more masculine and feminine traits somewhere in their head or their body or whatever. Even if it's not all the time, if it's just sometimes. It's not normal to be perfectly binary, right? Everybody is kind of on the spectrum. If we're talking about feeling, thinking, and presenting. Because obviously we already know that sex is binary. Sex meaning gametes, male, female, sperm, egg, simple, basic stuff. No, intersex is not a third sex. And we know that gender dysphoria is...
I'm sorry, what did she just... Differences in sex development, chromosome, hormone, general. Okay, so yes, you are born into two different sexes. There's like the male and then the female form. But so intersex has the mixture of both, so meaning like you can have both genital parts, or you can have the chromosomes as one and the genital parts as the other and stuff. It's a mixture of the two, so wouldn't it kind of be a third? I don't know. But the thing is just like, she said earlier that people who transition, meaning trans men and trans women, they can't actually transition to the opposite sex. But the thing is like, you actually can. We are changing our biological form. We are changing our hormonal and our secondary sex characteristics. No, we cannot change our chromosomes, but the thing is like with chromosomes, there are a lot of different mixtures. There's not just the XX and the XY chromosomes that we learned in our basic 8th grade biology class. Variation does not mean that someone with atypical sex characteristics is less male or female. Okay, so like basically she's putting that in there to basically trash on what I just said, and basically, oh, if you change something, that doesn't mean that that makes your body less female. So me, medically transitioning, me going through surgeries, and me being on testosterone for over a year and a half, that doesn't make me less female? Really? But yet the doctors are signing off of it, and I can actually change my gender suffix or whatever on my identification. I can change my actual birth certificate. So what does that mean? If all these scientific doctors with all this scientific research can provide a letter to the DMV or in like the hospital to prove like I am no longer female, what does that mean then?
So what does non-binary mean if it is a physical thing to some of these people? Like, does that mean having partial gender dysphoria, like only having dysphoria on part of your body? And if that was the case, I could get behind that because it is science.
It is the case though. That's the thing. A lot of people complain about something without actually doing any research, and then they say something of like, oh, I can get behind this if this is the case. And it's like, bitch, that is the case. Do your research.
And it would make sense to me that if somebody came to me and told me, listen, I'm non-binary, I feel if I was fully male, meaning like flat chest, testosterone-driven body, producing sperm, having a penis, I wouldn't feel comfortable, and I don't feel comfortable fully as a female either. As far as the logo...
That's a lot of non-binary people. That's basically like what my partner Sam has told me. Like, they don't feel comfortable in like the complete form of anything. So therefore, they are non-binary. Like, their medical journey, if depending on whether or not they want to go on a medical journey. Because that's the thing, like, you don't actually have to transition medically to help your dysphoria. There's a lot of natural ways that you can alleviate your dysphoria and stuff without actually doing surgeries and hormone replacement therapy, although that is like the best bet of alleviating dysphoria. But not a lot of people can actually afford these types of things, have the support for it right now, and just know a lot of knowledge within it. That's why there's a lot of YouTubers like myself trying to educate people what exactly it means to be trans and non-binary and the procedures behind it all, whether or not you want to go through it.
I think that would be very tricky. I think it's becoming increasingly difficult to figure out how to treat non-binary people in the world, because a lot of things are sex segregated or gender segregated or socially sex segregated. As I just said, I think if it is physically and biologically and gender dysphoria based, I can get behind the idea of non-binary, but if it is just something as simple as not fitting gender stereotypes, I actually think that is an incredibly sexist idea.
Okay. I'm surprised. I thought I was gonna be like extremely mad at her at this video, but I think she's just honestly confused. Like, what's wrong with our society is that a lot of us still misconstrue of what gender identity is and what gender expression is. But unfortunately, with our society, the gender expression usually that you portray, a lot of people relate it to your gender identity. So they're just like questioning their identity and their gender, and it's like there's nothing wrong with it. And I feel like non-binary is that safe place to start out, which it does unfortunately harm people who are truly non-binary. But I feel like a lot of non-binary individuals understand it and they don't really hate on those individuals. That's why there's not so much gatekeeping within the non-binary community, because they understand it's kind of like that breaking free from society. It's breaking free from the toxic masculinity and breaking free from the toxic femininity and just trying to actually find themselves. But to be truly non-binary, you do have to have some form of gender dysphoria, not just the discomfort of societal's definitions of masculinity and femininity.
Yes, I am filming this on a different day because apparently I had a lot more to say than originally anticipated. One of the most important questions I have currently regarding non-binary is, why does being non-binary mean the erasure of female characteristics? Let me explain. Why is it that almost every single female-born person that calls themselves non-binary either goes on HRT, testosterone, or at least gets a double mastectomy, top surgery? When people who are born male identify as non-binary, usually only just change their gender expression, meaning they wear different clothes, they change their hair, they wear makeup. How often do you see someone that's male that identifies as non-binary getting boobs, getting a boob job, or going on HRT?
Just because that's where their dysphoria lies. Just like with trans individuals, everyone's dysphoria is going to be different, everyone's transition is going to be different. It's the same with the non-binary. There is no coin exact non-binary transition. There are some AMABs that are non-binary that do get certain surgeries, just because you showed Sam Smith and Jonathan from Queer Eye, because you showcase the celebrities and stuff like that, that doesn't mean that, like, that's the head, that's the god of the non-binaries. That's what every AMAB does. And also, it's more socially acceptable for AFABs to showcase their surgeries and their transition than it is for AMABs, because there's such more toxic masculinity than there is toxic femininity. Females are more socially acceptable to the fact of other AFABs to experiment their gender and stuff and their gender expression, especially since like that whole women can do anything and women can do what men can do and stuff. AMABs, they have that toxic masculinity since childhood, saying that men are the best and stuff, and it's like, why are you going to throw away all this privilege of being a man to be the weaker form of a female, even though obviously females are not weaker than male. But that's kind of like the stereotypes that we are driven to believe since childhood.
Feel like they have to make physical changes, but the other doesn't. My friend Chad said this really well, I think. Men are taught to decorate their bodies if they wish to express themselves outside of gender norms. Women must bind, hide, disguise, or physically remove their femaleness in order to accomplish the same. I think this really all comes down to, how does one express being neither gender or neither sex? Is the presence of breasts much more obvious as a gender marker than the absence of them? Why are males that identify as non-binary only adding to themselves while females are removing parts of themselves? To me, that suggests that the male body type is the default gender? Why is one sex more focused on gender expression, clothes, hair, makeup, while the other is more focused on physical changes, like I said before? Testosterone, HRT, top surgery, basically not being perceived as female at all. I'm going to end the video on a very controversial note because I think my friend Chad, who identifies as non-binary by the way, makes a really good point.
That doesn't mean that he speaks for all non-binary people. Just because you're a lesbian doesn't mean that you can talk for all lesbians. Just because I'm a trans man does not mean that I speak for all trans men. I hate how she always says that. That's like the one thing that always pisses me off with her. She always confuses gender identity with gender expression, makes the gender look like a joke. She does this on purpose. It's obvious to anyone that actually knows what gender is. And then she also does this thing where it's like, oh, I'm a lesbian so I can talk about this topic. Or I know this trans friend.
He said, in older generations, trans men adopted a variety of masculine looks that fit their personality and often worked to reach an ideal masculine physique. Which I agree, look at people like Buck Angel. But the current generation isn't doing that. Is anti-female now equal to teenage boy? He asked.
No.
Why? I think he makes a really good point, and it's definitely up for a debate, and it's definitely a good point to end the video on.
That's the biggest thing that she also does, I've noticed, is that she, especially the trans man, why is she always hating us on us trans men? I don't like how she's relating so much with the non-binaries, with trans men, but she does this for the point of saying that it's sexist. She was saying that trans men are sexist, and how we are trying to devalue women. That's the biggest thing that a lot of people say with trans individuals, is that they're sexist, and that's like the easiest thing that they can say now, because the fact is, like, we have proven time and time again, we have all the scientific data, we have proven that dysphoria exists, how an individual can be born in an AFAB body with a male brain, and that's why they are trans. We have given so much scientific data, so much proof, and so many articles and showcases of transitioning that they're like, okay, now what can we say to just have this not be a thing? Oh, they're sexist, and like trying to cancel it. Men are taught to decorate their bodies if they wish to express themselves outside of gender norms. Yes, like I said, it's because of toxic masculinity that we have all been portrayed to when we were younger. Women must bind, hide, disguise, or physically remove their femaleness in order to accomplish the same. That's the thing though, breasts are considered so female, and therefore just because society considers them so female, that's why a lot of people get rid of them, because they're not female. It's not trying to be sexist in any regard, it's just they're not identifying with that sex. So they're getting rid of certain things that they have dysphoria with. If maybe if our society was more open, and hopefully that children nowadays, when they get older, they won't have to feel the same way that we had to feel. I feel like a lot of the things that we do are socially conditioned, and that's why so many people have certain dysphorias with certain things. It's because we were taught that way and stuff. So the whole non-binary community is not sexist. It's just that's where certain individuals within the non-binary community, that's where their dysphoria lies. Women don't have to bind. I've seen many non-binary individuals that don't bind and stuff. I think it's mainly about like individuals that you see, individuals that you actually talk to. And just because you know one non-binary individual, that does not mean that they get to talk about the non-binary community as a whole. Everyone's transition is going to be different. In older generations, trans men adopted a variety of masculine looks that fit their personality and often work to reach an ideal masculine physique. That's because we're trans men. Trans men does not equal non-binary. Non-binary does not equal trans man or trans female. They are non-binary. Everyone's transition within the non-binary is going to be different. Hello? Because they are a mixture of AFABs and AMABs. Trans men are just a mixture of AFABs. Trans females are a mixture of just AMABs. So of course the transitions are going to be different, and it's going to be a different belief. But you cannot relate non-binary people to trans men in saying that just because, of course trans men are going to be going towards the masculine physique, because we are trans men. We were men born in female form, so therefore we're going to do everything possible to change our biological selves through hormone replacement therapy, through surgeries and stuff. So yeah, just because there is an AFAB that identifies as non-binary, that doesn't mean that they have to do everything in their power to go towards the masculine self. And same with AMABs. AMABs aren't going to be going towards everything in their power to be the female form when they're non-binary. The non-binary self is just that. They're just non-binary. They don't associate with being female or male. They are just themselves. And you know what? Everyone's gender expression is going to be different. They're not going to be going full on androgynous either. Non-binary has nothing to do with expression. It has to do with their actual self, with their gender identity and their dysphoria. Some of the time with non-binary individuals, the dysphoria is just with the pronouns. Whether or not that's actual their dysphoria or if it's societal based dysphoria, that's for them to figure out on their own. Anyways, I hope you guys like this video. Please comment down below your thoughts on this, whether or not you think non-binary is sexist and stuff like that. Look at the statistics. If you find yourself watching multiple videos, you might as well subscribe. And don't forget to ring that bell down below so you get notifications whenever I upload a video. And I'll see you guys next time.